But all right, so today's April 12th, so it's almost exactly a month since I came to you and we did the ketamine yoga. So I just wanted to get straight from the horse's mouth. Yeah. So then how did you end up getting into ketamine?
Okay, so my ketamine, my story with ketamine is unusual. I was always interested in psychedelics, but scared of them. From the time I was in college, other people would do mushrooms. I had a few important experiences with mushrooms in just sort of showing me that things were not mundane and boring and numb, but like giving color to my experience and real antidepressant powers. But that was in very small doses, and when things would get higher dose, I would get very scared. A lot of trauma would start to well up, and I would have a difficult time handling it. So I sort of resolved that I smoked a lot of weed, but that psychedelics weren't my thing. So cut to 25 years later, and I am summoned to the deathbed of one of my former students, a dear friend of mine, who had stage 4 cancer and was going through it. So it was a journey that took. The whole thing was probably several years, but there were many months of this kind of like decline. We would have these long conversations. I'd go over there, and he would make coffee. He would cook. He was a really interesting guy, a philosopher, really brilliant guy. And he had some experiences with ketamine in the course of medical procedures. Gory shit. I mean, like, what are you going in for? They need to saw into my bone or something like that. They'd be like, oh, today we're going to be sawing into your bone and we'll give you ketamine. And he had these mystical experiences. And I was interested in ketamine because I had read an article in Scientific American by the neuroscientist Ramachandran, who was talking about it. And the language of describing the ketamine state was very much like these jnana yogis, these yogis in India practicing a very, very, very pure and extreme form of basically knowledge yoga. You try to realize what this is, and that's it. That's the yoga,
And the ketamine was lining up with what you had read in those books?
Yeah, you read these books like Nisargadatta, and he'd be talking about like seeing life on a distant movie screen, with no attachment, no pain, nothing. And it sounds pathological. I'm sure a Western clinician would be like, that man is suffering from, this is a yogi who has practiced for 30 years and has arrived. If you watch this man, you can find a few old videos. He's in his 70s and he's teaching, and he's like ultra sharp. The combination of like sharp, intense, and compassionate is like that's proofs in the pudding. There's no way this guy's faking it,
Yeah.
So it's like Advaita Yogi and Ramachandran, the neuroscientist's account of these ketamine patients, like basically who are dying of some illness, and they're seeing their bodies as if they're having an out-of-body experience. So there was a lot of resonance. So I was very curious, and my friend was having these procedures and having very mystical experience, partly maybe seeded by the fact that we were talking about a lot of these things during the daytimes. At some point, he was segueing from his plan. Basically, he went from the cannabinoids to ketamine to opiates. In his last final months, he found opiates the most effective. So he was leaving ketamine behind, and he gave me his medical ketamine bottle. He's like, here, take this. He knew that I was interested in the mind, knew that I was kind of scared of psychedelics, but that I would be careful about it. So I did a couple of meditation doses. I measured it. I did a lot of research. I knew, what was toxic and what wasn't. And I had barely noticed it. I had like a spacey meditation. Then a couple of weeks later, I did it again. Spacey meditation, maybe a little bit more a shimmer. And then I had this afternoon with him where his illness was getting worse. I spent many hours there. I was just emotionally really, really raw. And I think that made me a little more reckless than I would normally be.
Yeah.
But also I felt some kinship with him, some bond over this ketamine. So I went home and I took the rest of the bottle, and I thought it was less than it actually was. I think it.
You just took the bottom of it, like.
Yeah, but I had measured it beforehand, and I knew it wasn't dangerous. I knew it wasn't a toxic amount. But I said cheers to my buddy. I remember this. I sat in my meditation cushion. It was toward the end of the day, maybe 9 p.m. Eva's upstairs, my teenage kids are upstairs doing whatever they're doing. They'll be up till 2 a.m. or whatever. And I'm like, cheers, Ben. And I down the rest of this ketamine bottle. And after about 15 minutes, I'm coming up so fast that all the freak out mechanisms kick in. And I'm like, I need to call Eva, tell emergency room, we got to get an ambulance. I took too much ketamine. And it was like, that was the crossroads. And at that point, I said, no, I'm going to sit here. I'm on my meditation cushion. I can do this, And it was very much like a kind of ego-driven, come on, I've been practicing yoga for 30 years. I know I'm scared of psychedelics, but I can do this. So I just said, I'll do this. And, and I sat there in the dark on my meditation cushion as the ketamine built and built and built. And within another 15 minutes, I felt language trickling away. I would test words. They would sound real funny, strange. I tested my own name, and it sounded foreign. And at that point, I just let go, and it all disappeared. And so I would say that I have memory of this from the come down, which was several hours later. This lasted for hours. I crawled up to bed at maybe 1 a.m. It's interesting that no one checked on me. I guess Eva, I do a lot of long meditations in my room, so she had sort of decided I was okay. Didn't know that I had taken ketamine. So this, in the midst of this experience, or if you can even call it that, of having no ego at all, no language, no sense of self, no sense of body, no sense of who or what I am. So it's not a matter of I'm having a strange experience, which might be the mushroom experiences I had before, or I'm having an experience that's so strange I don't know who I am. And I had tried salvia a couple of times before that, so that was more like that. This was like, no, I don't have any idea of anything. It's all...
it was just experience.
Just the point of awareness. And the breath practice that I had been performing, a pranayama that I had been practicing rigorously, just sort of emerged. I would say came to me, but there wasn't really a me. It was like there was no, this is a fundamentally different kind of conscious experience. It's not the I'm going to do this now, and then I'm sort of watching myself do it, or if a person's ego is really immediate, then it feels like you're managing everything. This was like there was no thought. There was nothing. It was just like the breathing is happening. And the breathing was very energizing. I had also been doing loving kindness meditation, probably in conjunction with my friend who was sick. So there was a kind of heart-opening effect and a sense of universal love, all of these hallmarks of mystical experience that they define in, the whatever psychology, unity, complete love, no sense of myself or any division between myself and anything else, no sense of what myself was at all. The come down was the re-emergence of language. So language coming back and me saying, whoa, here I am, this is my body, me, I'm back, and filled with confidence, like a sea change inside me. There was a feeling of whoa, what just happened, in a sense of you read in the yogic texts, love is not personal. It's not a personal emotion. It can be delimited and personal, but it's something essential to the universe. And all of a sudden, it's like, now I know that. Now that's in my being. All these things that were abstract that I've been reading in the yogic texts for decades,
you experienced them
were
directly.
all of a sudden full immersion.
Yeah.
And the result of it in my body, when I came down, was complete confidence. Was like, and I would go through in my head all the different things in my life. All my karma, I have to deal with this is my job, I navigate this territory. And I would just visualize these things and just floating through it with complete confidence and energy. The amount of energy that was released was tremendous too, because I had been depressed on and off, but mostly on, for 40 years. My depression started in early childhood. I remember lying on the floor and not knowing what to do, and I was 6 or something, and it went all the way through teens, 20s, 30s, 40s.
It was just always kind of there.
It was always there. I was always slogging through it. I was always fighting through it. So I did some things in my life. I accomplished some things, but it was always fucking hard because depression was always there and so heavy, and anxiety was just the other flip side of the depression. So it's like, if you check in with me, some random time machine, okay, you're 16 and a half right now, how you feeling? You're 28, how you feeling? You're blah, 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 how you feeling? And any random check over all those decades would have been a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression,
just unwell.
Just always there. And then I'm sitting there in my room after this arc of this first ketamine trip, having done yoga pranayama and some kind of heart-opening loving kindness meditation in the thick of this experience where there wasn't a me. And I come down and I'm like filled with energy, and I realize this is the energy that was the depression was just eating. The depression's a stuckness, and it was like, what am I going to do with all this energy? So about a year after my friend passed away, he passed away soon after that, and I was mulling this experience over, and I knew it was big, and I didn't exactly know what was going to happen. I approached a psychiatrist in Connecticut, who's a Buddhist and an edgy kind of rebel. I won't give his name in this. He refers to the ketamine landscape as the Wild West. So in other words, we're all sort of like learning as we go along.
Yeah.
But I went to him and I said, I'm not depressed anymore. I know this is for major depressives, but I was depressed my whole life. I'm not depressed anymore. But I now realize there's all this trauma pain, and I want to deal with it. I want to work on it, and I want to build this Ketamine State Yoga practice because that was something, and I want to keep on working with it this way. And he gave me a prescription. So I've now had something like 50 deep ketamine trips where I have practiced yoga, pranayama, mudra, different forms of meditation, experimenting, but also really journeying, getting to know the territory.
Damn, that's cool.
Yeah.
It's so funny because you mentioned all that, and it's like that was kind of my first ketamine experience without the yoga, but like experiencing all of those things that you read about in yoga texts.
Yeah.
Because like I've read like, Autobiography of a Yogi. I've read like, because my wife was a yoga teacher, so she had like the Patanjali, what was it? What's the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali?
Yeah.
So all these books were always kicking around from when she went to yoga school. So like if I was like on the toilet or like just somewhere, I would pick it up and start, I would just start reading this. I'd be like, that's a cool book. I'd be like, well, it's a really cool book. And I would like read through it and be like, well, this is cool. And then when I did the ketamine, it was very similar, like the loving awareness and all that experience. I was kind of like, I remember the next day I was trying to explain to her, like, that ketamine was, I can't even begin to explain to you what happened to me last night. She was like brushing her teeth and getting ready for school or work or whatever, and was like, I don't have time to talk about this right now. I'm like, all right, someone does. And then
experience.
The second time I went to do it, I think I did it on the couch again. And then the third time, I like sat myself up and I was like, I'm going to sit up. Because normally I was taking the lozenge and diving right into it. So I was like, I'm going to sit up and see how long I can stay with this lozenge before I like retreat to the bed. But my bed was set. So I was like, I'm going to sit up. So I was literally just sitting there. And like, I hadn't done yoga in maybe 6 or 7 years. But like just involuntarily, I started doing like what I remember from, I started doing my Bikram poses without a single thought in my head. Like right before, like, cause so, you take the troch, you dissolve it for about 20 minutes and then you start to go into that state, but you still have some wiggle room for like maybe 10 more minutes.
Yeah.
So in that 10 minutes of wiggle room, as if I was on puppet strings, I just started doing my old Bikram stuff. Yeah. And I literally hadn't thought about it ever. And I never connected the two dots. With the exception of like now looking back, I'm like, oh, those experiences were like from those books. But it wasn't until I tied it to the yoga that I was like, that's where I've like learned about this. So I started doing all of those like yoga poses. And then at the end of Bikram, I always remember laying down and doing like the breathing and like the savasana. Yeah. So I just involuntarily jumped into like the only yoga I knew, which was about a year of Bikram almost a decade ago.
Yeah.
So then I got into it. And then after I came out, I was like, God damn, like this ketamine and the yoga are two peas in a pod. So I started Googling it, and that's how I found you. And I was like, damn, this guy's onto this. And you're the only name that popped up when I Googled ketamine yoga. Yeah. So the next time I did it, as I was like re-emerging, I had my iPad out to listen to like music. I was like, I must reach out to that man and get just meet him or figure out what the hell he's doing. So that's when like I messaged you, and then that's when this whole thing started. But like my question for you is like, because I never know what to tell people, but it's like, if you are just sitting there and you know, obviously most adults don't know people that sell ketamine. So if you're just trying to get into it, what's the best route to go? Like
It's a good question. So there are, in the cities, you have a lot of nurse practitioners, psychiatric nurses that will prescribe. There will be doctors like the doctor I found in Connecticut who will prescribe. Mainly, there's the IV or IM option, and a lot of the clinics that provide that will, for IV certainly, it's going to be conducted at their facility.
Yeah, I'm saying, how do you get like a home practice going?
Yeah,
like, what's
so
the
what
best
you
way to
need
get
are the
troches?
tablets.
Yep.
Yeah, so there are some places like I don't want to give any of the names because I don't want to give them free advertising, but you can Google around. Like there are the ketamine clinics, and the problem is they charge a lot. And ketamine is dirt cheap, so there's really no justification for it other than that they can. And they don't turn people away. So in other words, I wouldn't be telling your audience to fake a condition, in the sense, I feel very mixed about this. On one hand, it's the medical establishment being disingenuous and fake, saying you have to have these conditions otherwise, but then anyone can get it. It was the same with legal weed, medical weed when it came to New Jersey was like the very, very strict set of conditions, and yet
there's a funny phone call. I got it in Pennsylvania, and it was literally a 3-minute phone call.
Yeah.
If that.
Yeah.
If it was 3 minutes, and it was like the card was in the mail.
Yeah.
And then when I got the ketamine too, I went to a place. I mean, I'll say it was called Smith Family Ketamine.
Oh, right. He was busted.
It was weird. He got busted, but these other companies are still doing exactly what he was doing. So I mean, I don't even
lop one head off, 2 new ones grow. So, I have respect for him. I mean, I at least respect his earnestness, and I know that a lot of his patients were very devoted to him and considered what he was doing extremely helpful.
And he was cool about it. But like my thing is, like, you can go to a guy like that, or you can go to one of those programs, and they kind of overprescribe it, in my opinion. Yeah. Like I remember when I got my prescription, I was like, I'm not taking that many troches. It was like one every other day or something crazy. So it's like you could access those. And then if you want to set this practice up, like what do you think is the best thing? Like once a month?
Exactly. So Ketamine State Yoga could be looked at as harm reduction, because if you want to practice this way, what I'm trying to do now is to convince people in the medical establishment, mainly now I'm working with therapists and some nurses. The doctors are very, very conservative. But basically, there's a lot of evidence that mystical experience correlates with the durability of the healing result, not just for ketamine, but for all psychedelics. If you have a mystical experience, according to this like dipshitty mystical experience questionnaire, but still, you score high on the mystical experience questionnaire, it's more likely that your alcoholism will go into total remission, or we'll check in with you 3 years later and you'll still have less depression, less PTSD symptoms. So the idea of Ketamine State Yoga, although it's not the main point, is that it will enable a mystical experience. And it's particularly a kind of yoga breathing, which is a pranayama that focuses on letting go of the exhalation completely. And if anybody said to me, like, what's, in a nutshell, you've had 30 years of yoga, what's the most effective practice for balancing the body, for doing it all, for like improving the energy, reducing depression, negative emotions, for the access, a gateway to mystical experience, it would be total release of the exhalation. So that's what I happened to be practicing that day when I took too much ketamine. It was this out-breath pranayama. Now, in 2019, there was a study, semantic study, where they looked at Erowid trip reports from, something like 150 different substances. So like cocaine trip reports, cannabis trip reports, 5-MeO-DMT trip reports. And then they asked the computer which of these substances produces an effect most similar to near-death experiences. And they entered the full, scientifically validated database of near-death experience reports. People who like are on the verge of death and experience like the life review, and often walk away with positive transformation that lasts, this is all connected, right? Positive transformation that lasts for several years or for their entire life. So ketamine is number one of
For
all the
matching up?
substances. Yeah.
That's pretty
By a
cool.
lot.
I would believe that.
By a lot. In other words, it's all the usual suspects, the mystical compounds. You got your mushrooms near the top, Aya near the top, toad near the top. And then there's this huge jump at the top. And you can, if you're interested, the studies online, you can look at the statistics, but it's dominated by ketamine.
Yeah.
So ketamine is producing this near-death experience simulation, and I luckily went into that first experience with, think about it, a pranayama that emphasizes completely letting go of the remaining breath in the lungs.
Yes, you were primed.
So it was very synergistic like that.
I've seen ever since, like when I came to see you, and that's the last time I did ketamine, it was a month ago. But since I was doing that breath work you were saying of like the inhale, exhale, I've been doing that at night, like as I'm going to bed, and I'm able to tap into like the ketamine, not so much space, but mindset.
Beautiful.
So that was kind of like what you were saying was the
And that
goal.
plugs into your question about how often would you do it, and your keen, really observation, which applies to everyone, is part of the scandal, is that people are being given shit tons of it and told to do it. Like I was looking on the therapeutic ketamine board today, and somebody's like, I'm starting to have the bladder issues. And once you have the bladder issues, my understanding is it's fairly serious. It's mechanical scratching of your bladder.
Yeah.
It's led to thickening of the bladder wall. And this person's, in the medical context, zero recreational, but they're being given large doses of ketamine, larger than the dose that we took, 3 times a week for years. 3 times a week. Now, here's the key, is here you are weeks after the experience, or a month after the experience, and you're still touching in with it.
Yeah.
That's the key.
And in
psychedelic world, that's called integration. And if you integrate the experience, if your goal isn't, let me feel better for a couple hours and it'll come back and I'll take it again, don't worry, I can take it as much as I want.
That's the mindset a lot of people have.
Exactly. That's what the medical establishment encourages.
Yeah.
Because you're not a good patient, Tom, because you're not a good patient financially.
Yeah.
Because, hey, if you do it once and you're like, I don't need to do that again.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's been a month and I'm still conscious of this roundness and looseness in my breath. Then you win. So and I was talking with a psychedelic lawyer about this, and he gave me this idea, and I was like, of course, Ketamine State Yoga is harm reduction, because it's like the goal of this practice. If I do it every day, I'm not going to get that thing. Yeah. I have to wait a month, and I do it again, and I lead up to it, and I build up to it, and whatever those intentions are that are swirling around it, and all that energy culminating. And it may not be a big experience. It's not a good idea to get the hopes up for some ego experience.
Yeah, I look at it, like, I think the way you tied it to yoga, it's like, that's how ketamine is for me, like, in a weird, like, analogy type way, where it's like, I think yoga is really, really cool and really fascinating. And I think ketamine is really cool and really fascinating. But they both share another property, I've realized, whereas like you can't get obsessed with either of them. Because they both have a diminishing return. This might work wonders for you, but you really have to start applying what you're getting out of it to the point where you don't need it. I've seen this with almost all psychedelics, where it's like, if you're not taking in that lesson, like it's not going to keep working for you.
No. And it may lead you astray.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tenzin Wangyal, one of my root teachers, says, puts it in terms of the ego. You're like, the best place to arrive in terms of the ego is no ego. Like that would be a stabilized enlightenment state, right? But that's not, you just don't just jump there. Most of us have these weak egos, and maybe that's too oversimplified, but a lot of the machinery of our daily mind is self-sabotaging, is creating pain that need not be there, beyond the suffering that belongs to a human body mind regardless. So the progression for a person is from weak ego to strong ego. He calls it the center. So weak center to strong center to no center, if you continue to practice and get real serious about practice. So most of us are on that journey in this whatever psychedelic healing, using yoga as a healing modality, moving from a weak center, which means We don't like ourselves. We're telling ourselves all kinds of shit. We're creating lots of stress in the body. The breath is getting seized like this because of the obsessive thoughts. And we're moving to a place we have better flow and so like that. But of course, therein lies all the temptation. And this world, like, the society is what it is. So there's a constant framing of everything. What am I getting out of this?
Yeah.
What is this going to do for me? And really, yoga at its essence is about letting go of that issue.
Of that expectation.
Yeah. But that's hard to do in this society.
Yeah, it's next to impossible. But yeah, I'm at a point now where I'm like, I'm almost like I retired from ketamine. But I keep it open where it's like, I know exactly where it is and when I'll need it again. And I know at some point I'll be like, oh, I should do that again. Like,
yeah. Most of what my practice is just finding different ways to practice with the breath, play with the breath in the ketamine state.
That's
it.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
You got any other?
To be clear for your audience, it's pranayama yoga. It's
that's what you should
very
study.
Little motion. I really appreciate, though, and my philosophy is changing thanks to you and other people who are doing practices and making their own discoveries. When I say Ketamine State Yoga, people assume, because that's what they think of as yoga, is the postures, the physical things. And I, for the very beginning, because my first trip was this gargantuan K-hole, I never thought about doing postures in conjunction with ketamine at all. It was all just like really intense yoga pranayama, and then mudras, hand positions, meditation techniques and things like that. But your experience, there are several other people that have echoed that too, where they have these like spontaneous motion, like, and it's yoga, and they're doing this movement that feels cathartic and extremely creative and energizing. I think that's just a beautiful avenue to explore.
That's what I get out of it. Like when I do my stretching in the beginning, I'm like, as I'm slipping into the state, and like I feel things pop and I feel things limber up, they're like connecting to like past memories and emotions.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And
Body
then when
keeps
I
a score.
slide into it, it all like is unraveling. So
yes, that's the therapeutic thing.
Yeah.
And that's a damn shame if doctors are just giving it as a fucking needle and nothing, because a somatic therapist, someone who knows trauma, they'll be able to say, you have this increased understanding of your body, your embodiment.
Yeah.
And that's what you're going to do. You're going to look for that pain, because a person who's been major depressive for 30 years likely has shit that's locked inside their body that hasn't been processed.
That's so cool.
So ketamine's optimal for that too. The therapists I'm working with now are mostly ketamine therapists, general psychedelic therapists, somatic therapists, and our goal is to figure out the way I see it is use these Ketamine State Yoga methods to induce the sort of most mystical total immersion experience, and then on the come down let the psychologists do their magic. Because they know the person, like this is the person, they're working on the relationship with their mother, their own self-hate or whatever the fuck it is. And then you have this optimal situation where your breath, it's like you're saying a month later, you're touching in. So if you can give that to somebody, when you have that surge of negative emotion, there's the prospective memory, that negative emotion that has defined your life, notice it. First notice it, and then come to your breath, just like you did when you were in that hallowed, sacred ketamine state. And then you got something. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Henry. Well, thanks for coming back.
Yeah,
and I'm sure I'll see you again soon,
Tom.
dude.
Yeah.
We got way more to cover.
You'll share me